Hello to everybody. Welcome back to our workflow series of webinars. Now, this is the third and final part. So if you haven't seen the first two and you are still new to TaxDome, I would highly recommend watching those and then returning here afterwards, because to understand today's topic, you need to have a good grasp of the basics. Now, at the end of the previous webinar, we talked about the ways to flesh out your pipeline, as well as adding jobs and the client experience as well. Today, we're going to delve into the more advanced topics. So let's take a look at our agenda for today. We'll start by discussing conditional automations, which tend to be quite popular with our user base, as well as some smaller improvements you can make to your workflow. We will then spend some time focusing on how the recurrences work and how you will set those up. Now, once that's clear, we will talk about why linking elements to jobs is extremely important for most firms. Afterwards, we'll briefly talk about time tracking and budgeting, as well as why they are relevant to your workflow. And finally, we will wrap things up by talking more about how you'll start working with clients and how you'll complete those processes on a day-to-day basis. So let's get going right away here. We're going to jump into our first topic for this session. First up, we're going to talk about conditional automations. Now, conditional automations are a natural extension of the idea to cut down on the time you need to spend doing manual, repetitive actions. We already covered the basics of this in the previous session with our regular automations, but conditions allow you to expand the use cases even further. So let me break it down this way. If you have two clients who you're doing tax returns for, you'll want to put them both in your tax return pipeline. However, what do you do if the process for each one of them isn't exactly the same? Maybe one client is a returning client, while perhaps the other one is a completely new client. Despite the service they are both asking for being the same, your process will likely vary to some degree. This is where the conditional automations will come into play. You can set up automations or entire stages in your pipelines, which only trigger for the relevant client groups. As an example, at the beginning of your pipeline, you might want to request a retainer fee from all new clients while not doing that for your returning clients. You would set up a conditional automation within the first stage to send out an invoice with the retainer amount, and then set it up in a way that it would only activate for clients with the new client tag. The same logic applies in different scenarios. You might want to use a single pipeline for both your individual and your corporate tax returns. Now, you can process both at once and make sure that the correct steps are done for each by making them conditional automations. If a client has an 1120 tag, for example, they'll trigger the automations needed for their returns. If the client has a 1040 tag instead, they can trigger the automations for the individual returns. As you might have guessed by now, tags are the main requirement for conditions to work. You can think of it this way. If a client has X tag, then trigger Y automation. If a client does not have that tag, simply skip that automation. This is why we always recommend making sure that everyone in your client list has the appropriate tags. Not only does it help you with your organization, but it also expands the functionality and the flexibility of your automations. So let me quickly show you how to make any automation a conditional one before we move on to anything else. Go into your pipeline settings and then click on the Edit Automations button. You'll see an Add Conditions button inside every automation. Click that and a menu will slide out listing all the tags that you have in your portal. Select the ones that you want and save it. That's it. Now you should see the tag listed inside the automation saying it will only trigger for clients with the selected tags. You don't have to do anything else to make it work, as I described earlier. The other thing you can do is make an entire stage conditional, and it is the same process, but you select the tags by using the Add Conditions button right here instead of in the menu. If a client has these selected tags, their job will enter the stage. If not, they'll skip it and go on to the next one. Setting all of this up is incredibly easy from a technical standpoint. As long as you have tags applied to your client, you can go straight into your pipeline, add the conditions, and start using conditional automations right away. Right now, let's hear from one of our consultants how he takes advantage of what we just talked about.
Hello, everyone. My name is Russ Hoskins, CPA. I'm located here in Orlando, Florida. I've been a TaxDome user since 2021, and today I'm here to answer a few questions about TaxDome and automations, and I'm looking forward to giving you guys some information on how we use TaxDome. So conditional automations, we're going to use those primarily when we're setting up our pipelines to help us do a variety of things in our pipelines. And so, to start, in our initial stages, I'll just talk about our 1040 and our tax pipelines. One of our starting pipelines is where we assign account access to team members. So really, when we add a new account, we just have to tag it with the staff that are going to work on the job. So from the admin person to we tag also the preparer and the reviewer on the job, and then that way we're able to in our pipeline, we've got conditional tags set up that if this tag exists, then it will give account access. So we do that so that, when we put people on the job and tag it, it's going to automatically update it when we add jobs to the pipeline. So that's one of the automations that we use. We also are using conditional automations for our engagement letters, and so many of our clients we do give advanced pricing to, and so we've built into our proposals the ability to have engagement letters say either standard pricing, or we have custom pricing that we've used and we've put into our our custom fields. And so if we've got a 1040 that we've priced, say at 575, and that's what we've quoted, then we would have a tag for 575, and we would use conditional tagging on that client to send them an engagement letter. And so we've got two versions of our engagement letter. Our proposal, we've got an engagement letter that uses the custom field that would say their pricing is 575, and then we've got an engagement letter that's going to say standard hourly rates. And so we're using stage condition tagging to say, basically, if this client is a standard hourly client, send them this engagement letter. And then if we have clients that get custom pricing up front, then that one we have a tag called year-end fee billed, and those are clients that we will set up and send them our custom engagement letter. And so for those of you using a combined pipeline for both your 1040 and your 1120Ss, 1065s, you would want conditional automations in there set up to send the right engagement letter. I think the couple things that I would definitely recommend is, number one, setting up a good system of tagging, so that you can tag the things that you want to track in your system, and things that maybe one client has that or a group of clients has that not all your clients have, but you want to do slightly differently. And that's the beauty of TaxDome, is that you can create a tagging for that one-off item, whether it's an engagement letter, and they get their own special engagement letter, and maybe you've got a handful, 10, 20 clients that way. Well, you could set up conditional formatting to say and set up 20 separate tags for those 20 unique engagement letters, or 20 in our case might be client requests for those 30 or 40 bookkeeping clients that get their own specific little checklist from us in their own little specific client requests that we're doing. And so the tagging will allow you to kind of dive into a client and dive into a pipeline on an individual client, but you don't have to. You can really start out much more basic and build out your pipelines. But that's what the pipelines allowed us to do, with the conditional formatting. I think one of the things I would recommend in looking at pipelines is of course there's a lot of great templates out there, under templates, and then firm templates. There's templates that you can use to set up your pipelines, and I think that's a great start to just review those pipelines. And one of the great things about TaxDome is that you can constantly you know tweak and change your pipelines, add stages or move stages, and jobs don't have to follow you can take a job and move it back to a previous stage or move it forward. And so one of the things I would say is that you can start off with the various stages of your jobs, but and then add automations as you gain an understanding of the power of TaxDome.
The next function I want to briefly talk about are the custom job statuses. You've seen the client-facing statuses in the previous part of the series, but we didn't talk about the custom job statuses at all yet. Therefore, we're going to go over that now. In your pipeline settings, you'll have this tab titled Job Statuses. By default, you'll have two possible statuses you can use. Active, meaning the job is progressing through your pipeline, is being worked on, and archived, which is used to mark a job as finished or canceled. However, there are many situations where you could benefit from a way to share with your team if there are other important situations going on with that particular job, whether that be a delay due to missing information or a deadline extension. You can make any kinds of custom statuses you need, and then you can apply them at any point. Before I show you how you can apply it, let me show you one more function tied to these custom job statuses. You can have automations trigger when a job's status changes. Similar to how we just talked about conditional automations using tags to trigger actions, custom job statuses can come with their own automations. As an example, I'll add one task automation here, which will notify my team that we are missing important information and that we need to go ahead and request it. Alternatively, you could send a message or create a client request. The list of available automations is the same as the regular one, so you can get creative here. If we open up a job right now, you'll see the option to change the status instantly right at the top of it. And when I do that, I'll see a prompt to confirm that I want to trigger the automation that I just set up a moment ago. It will be linked to the section up here, which describes the status and explains what needs to be done in order to proceed with the job. Not only that, but when this linked action gets completed, the job will automatically switch back to the active status. So it's an awesome way to keep everybody on your team on the same page without needing to constantly communicate every little small change all across the board. Additionally, jobs with different statuses appear differently in the Kanban view, which makes them really easy to spot at a glance. Now, before we move on to the next topic, let me just clarify one more thing regarding these statuses. The custom job statuses are visible to your team. They are meant to be used internally. However, the client-facing job statuses, as the name would obviously suggest, are meant to keep your clients in the loop. You can see an example of the two on your screen. So now that we've covered conditional automations and job statuses, let me show you a little trick to make tagging your clients much easier. We established that for conditional automations, you will need your clients to have tags applied to them. So pay very close attention to this. It's extremely common for firms to send forms to new clients in order to collect their important information. Whether it's part of the onboarding process or your service pipelines, you will likely send a form to your clients. We added a function to our organizers a little while back, which lets you automatically apply tags to clients depending on the answers that they select. You could set up your onboarding organizer to ask them questions regarding which services they need from you. Then you'd open the settings for that question and enable the tagging function. You then have to select which answer will do what. They can either add or remove tags, but in this case, I would just add the service-specific tags for each option that I listed here. Now, if you haven't had a chance to work with organizers and are confused about how to set one of those up, I would highly recommend taking a look at our various help resources that cover all of this in great detail. This session is all about workflows, so we won't dedicate time to teaching you how to build organizers right now. Just remember that once you have your organizers built, you can enable this option to apply tags at any point. It'll not only help you organize your clients very well, but you can also integrate this into your workflows. You could ask your clients a question which would apply a tag. And then you could have the stage in your pipeline after the one with the organizer set up to have multiple conditional automations, one for each possible answer. This way, you could have a personalized process in place without needing to actively do anything yourself past the initial setup process, of course. It becomes similar to a choice-based process where the client can select how you'll proceed with the rest of that particular process. Features like these often come in very handy once you start encountering a point in your workflow where you notice how some additional optimization could save you a couple of steps in your day-to-day work. So even if you don't set this up from the very beginning, you will be able to update your pipelines at any point. Next up, let's move on now and we will talk about recurring jobs. After you set up your pipelines and add all your conditions and your automations, you will want to add jobs. However, you don't need to do that step manually. The normal and most common process would be to go to your client's list, select your client, and then add everybody to your pipeline. That absolutely works just fine and will continue being a viable option for you. But you can actually save a little bit of time here by setting up a schedule for your clients. If we use, for example, a monthly bookkeeping process, you'll have to create new jobs for your bookkeeping clients. Despite being easy to do, it is an unnecessary hassle, especially if your bookkeeping clients have different schedules, meaning you wouldn't be adding everybody's job on the exact same day. What you'll do instead is set up job recurrences for your clients and then let TaxDome handle the rest. The easiest way to do this is to open the job recurrences page from the workflow section. Use the new job recurrence button and then select everybody that you want to add. Next, you just need to enter the details and schedule details. We already have some preset options for the most common needs of our users, but if you have some special clients with unique schedules, then you can always use the custom option and set their schedule up that way, exactly how you need to see it. Now, similar to the rest of the setup process, this does require a little bit of time investment up front. But once you get it set up, it can keep going forever and you won't need to worry about whether or not you or somebody else from your team did or did not create jobs on time, or perhaps they used the wrong details. It solves all of this. Now, naturally, even if there are some mistakes, you can still select the clients in this list and edit their recurrence details at any point in time to fix them. Let's hear what our consultant thinks about these recurring jobs.
So we primarily, as far as relying on what types of jobs we create, we primarily, of course, rely upon reoccurring jobs. And we set all our jobs up to reoccurring, and reoccurring is fairly easy to use in TaxDome. And one of the really nice things we like about the reoccurrences is that you can have jobs such as payroll, live payrolls. You can have those reoccurring on different cycles. So some clients can be weekly, some clients can be set up to reoccur bi-weekly or bi-monthly. And so we really like that. And so we primarily rely upon using reoccurring jobs, but we do use it from time to time for one-off jobs, and that might be something where, say, we're doing a business valuation for gift tax return, or we're doing responding to an IRS notice, and so we've got a tax resolution pipeline where we handle any sort of tax resolution, whether that's be helping a client with setting up an installment plan, or responding to an IRS notice, or conducting an audit, sales tax audit. We'll have various types of tax resolution that we'll handle through a tax resolution pipeline, and those are typically non-reoccurring jobs, and so we'll have those set up to just we add them to the pipeline and add the job, but we don't set those typically to reoccur. No, I do not, and I wouldn't recommend setting up your jobs to not be in reoccurring, as far as, like, say, your 1040 work or your bookkeeping or your payroll, because it's that's the strength of the program, is that is to set your jobs up one time and not have to come back and set them up each time. And so we tend to, if you're worried about, you don't want to kick off any automations that you might have in that first stage, then I would recommend have the job reoccur, and then just have the first stage of the job a holding stage, and it can be a blank stage where a job will be set up and reoccur, and then you'll move those jobs over into that initial stage. And so we don't use that on our bookkeeping or like our payrolls. We want those jobs to immediately go into the first stage and assign tasks and update tags, anything that we want that first stage to do. But say our 1040s, we do want those going in a holding stage, because we want those set up usually a month and a half before we're going to send out engagement letters, before we're doing various things. And the reason why we want those set up a little early is, if we want to use some of the budgeting features, we want to look at fees. Maybe we're going to adjust fees on clients, and so we're using it as a time to be able to look at assignments and for the upcoming year. And so before it hits that initial stage where it's going to update account access, and we want to have that initial stage where we've looked at tagging. Are we going to change staff around and do various things that we might want to do before we move it into our stage where we're going to actually assign account access. So I would say you definitely use reoccurring jobs.
All right, folks, we are making some great progress here. By now, you've learned the most important things to keep in mind about building your pipelines, and also saw the most efficient way of adding new jobs. Next, we should talk about keeping everything important to a job organized and easily accessible for you and for your team. One of the reasons you're using TaxDome today is to keep everything convenient. Having your billing, communications, your documents, and everything else in one place is invaluable. However, when I say one place, you likely assume I mean the entirety of the portal. But we go a bit beyond that. When you're doing work for your clients, you will want to have your jobs moving through those pipelines. As that happens, everything created through your automations will be linked to the job and visible right from within the job itself. You can see that the job has a whole section dedicated to the linked items here. Now, we briefly touched on this previously, but it is important to talk about some use cases for these linked items. Now, on many occasions, there will be unique elements that cannot be taken care of through automations. Documents are a perfect example of this. If you're working on tax returns, you'll be dealing with 8879 forms, the actual 1040 forms, and many more. Now, someone from your team will have to upload those into TaxDome, but it's crucial for them to link it to the relevant job as they are uploading them. Now, regardless whether they're printing the documents through the desktop app or they're directly uploading it through the portal, they will see the option to link it to a job. If they miss that step, they can also link it at any time from inside the job using the link button. So let's say your tax preparer uploads the documents and then the reviewer has to go over it in the next stage of your pipeline. If the document is linked, the reviewer will waste no time searching for it. Now, the other benefit is also tied to the auto move function. If the element has any pending action, whether that be a signature on a document, a pending payment, client tasks, or anything else, they'll trigger the auto move in the stage once everything is done, the exact same way that other automations do. So you not only benefit from easy organization, but you can also plan your stages around some elements becoming the auto move trigger after that manual creation. Now, we see this with a lot of invoices. Many firms choose to bill their clients unique prices instead of a flat or tiered pricing. In those situations, the invoice needs to be created manually and then linked. Once the invoice is paid, the job will move forward into the next stage. Now, another example of this are situations where you're missing some information from your client. You can create a request, and once they deliver everything to you that you were missing, the job can now move forward again. There are a ton of possible scenarios here. So let's hear what our consultant has to say.
So in looking at your job card, we really on the job card feel like we want everything that we can link there linked to the job. And be on that job card so that anybody in the firm that's going to review that return or call it up is going to be able to see, the various things that are associated with that job. And so, in looking at, say, our 1040s, the job in there, very important that you've got all your tasks linked. And so, our tasks are automated in our pipeline, so all of our tasks are automatically linked. But for whatever reason, if you had created a separate task, maybe you were going to do a special meeting with the client after we delivered the return, you can add tasks. And I recommend, if you're going to do anything like that, you're going to add like a special task for a client to do a meeting or something like that, that you can add that task from within the pipeline, and make sure you link that type of thing to the pipeline. And so we expect in the job card to have the organizer, to have the task, your chats, the invoice, your time entry for you and your staff should all be in the chat. Your proposal, your engagement letter, of course, we said. And so our job cards are really going to have just about everything associated with it when we upload the 8879. And this is key for us. This is one of those things where we can't really automate this. So we have to manually link. And of course, if you're in a job card, you can go up to the three dots or right below the three dots, there's a button that says link, where you can link documents and such. And so we will link our 8879 and a copy of the return to the job card. And so you're basically, and then it will, once you've set up your e-signature on your 8879, it will auto move you to your next task. So if you should be in your pipeline, when you're sending out your 8879, you should have a stage in your 1040 pipeline, your 1120s, 1065 pipelines. You'll want to have a stage that's going to be, send, 8879 to client and get signature. And so we will basically then link that 8879, and then it should auto move us into the next stage, which is, for us, the client's e-sign the return. So our next stage will be to e-file the return and to get the client or get the IRS acceptance. And so then we'll create a task in that stage for our admin person to file the return and get confirmation. And so really you want to have everything attached to your job card, so that at any point in time you can go look at your job card, even after you've archived the job, which is you can go over to the client, and under workflows, there's a place to see your archive jobs. And so now at any point in time, I can go back and look at last year's 1040 job card for any client, and I can see right from there, any chats that were linked. So even though the chats have been archived, even though everything really has been archived from the job, I can still look at the archive job and see everything that's associated with it. In our job cards, we're linking the deliverables. So in a bookkeeping engagement, that might be the financial statement, or maybe a copy of a sales tax return, or something that where we've delivered that to the client, and then we link it into the job card. So on the tax return, of course, it's going to be a copy of the client copy of the return and the 8879 signature copy. At this point, I don't know that, for us, I think that, we constantly are working on, uh, keeping our pipelines condensed and not get too many stages. And so that's one of the things that, we work toward. I mean, you can have, I've seen some pipelines out there where there seems like there's 20 or 25 stages into the pipeline. And so that was far different than our old system, where we had a project with maybe, anywhere from 6 to 10 tasks. And that was at the max for most of our clients. And so I didn't want to entirely, have a pipeline that had so many stages that it was intimidating for the staff to use. And so I worked to kind of condense down the pipeline. And I'm happy to say that there's a new feature coming out called job statuses that was just in our update that's going to be coming out in 2025. It looks like, hope maybe sooner, who knows? But the job statuses will also allow you to condense down, I believe, some of your stages. And so we've begun using the job statuses as part of the beta to learn that process. And in the beta, they're working through the where you can set up a specific job status for missing information, or you can set it up, say, for waiting for signature or various other things, where it'll allow you to condense down some of your stages. And so if you're like me and maybe your pipeline, you're looking at it and going, well, I've got 12, 14, 15 stages. How can I get this maybe down 3 or 4 or 5 stages? I'm happy to report that with the new job statuses that's coming next year, or coming, hope maybe this year, who knows? That's really going to help us. And so we're building out where our extensions will occur under the new job status feature. And so I know it was just in our news feed. If you're not in the community, you should join it. I think we're transitioning from Facebook over to a new community platform. But I know that was just mentioned in there. And so we're excited for job statuses to help us in setting up our pipelines and condensing some stages, and also helping us, it's almost like a mini pipeline within a pipeline. And so it lets you, they're building it out around missing information, but we're seeing that we're able to use it for 5, 6 things that we're able to do in our pipeline. So as that comes on board, I look forward to sharing that.
All right, everybody. I know this has been a fire hose of information. I'm hoping that you are still able to keep up with all of the things that you're learning today. Just as a reminder, we have a ton of help resources about every single feature in TaxDome. So make sure to check those out. If you ever feel like you don't understand something, or maybe you just want a refresher, feel free to head back and watch those. All right, now let's get back into covering the remaining topics. The next one is not as tied to your workflow as all the other features we talked about so far. TaxDome has a built-in time tracker. Whenever you're working on tasks related to your client, you should always enable the time tracker. The most convenient way to do so is by using the button at the top of your page. It's always accessible, and you can start the timer within just a couple of clicks. Alternatively, you can also start tracking time from inside your jobs. There's a button right here which instantly starts to track your time, and it also directly links the time entry to that particular job. Having all your time monitored in this way has several benefits. You'll be able to accurately bill your clients based on the amount of time spent working on their particular jobs. You'll have accurate reports which you or your admins can review at any point to spot any issues or find room for improvement. And you'll be able to effectively use the time budgeting feature. Now let's talk about this last point that I just mentioned. We recently introduced the ability to set a time budget for your jobs. This way, as long as you keep tracking your time, you'll be able to compare whether you're spending way too much time on a particular job. And if you are, you can see what there is to do and take action to resolve that issue. Now, the most convenient way to check your time budget usage is from the jobs list, since you can add a column for the time spent, budget, and the variance. Those fields alone will give you a very clear overview, and you can use the filters and sorting functions to find any outliers if you need to. Also, as a quick tip, if you don't see these columns, use the gear icon in the corner to enable or reorder those. Additionally, you can also see the time budget and variance whenever you open any job. As long as your time entries are linked to the job, all the information will be conveniently displayed right inside it. We absolutely recommend all firms use the time tracking feature. Without it, you would not be able to use certain features such as the budgeting and reporting, but you would also not be able to do any accurate billing or effective capacity planning. While we don't delve into the technicalities of these particular functions since they're not related to today's topic, let us hear what our consultant has to say.
We think it's important to track time because you set your budgets on jobs, and you set your billing on a job, you really kind of need to know which jobs are performing with your expectations, and which jobs aren't performing, and you need to raise fees, or you need to review if you're getting out of scope on those jobs. And sometimes that's not always easy to see, and you have to sit down and review with staff, and you can look through that time and say, are we out of scope on anything here? Is there anything where the client's asking us to do things that really aren't really part of the bookkeeping engagement, or aren't really part of the 1040? We did some send out some forms for the client, or help them with an installment agreement, or did something that do we need to consider that in our engagement letters, we provide for the fact that if we get out of scope, we will bill that time hourly, and we give them an hourly rate, even if it's in a fixed fee if we leave scope. And so we feel like time's important to capture how we're doing. It's kind of are we performing within our budgeted time frame, or are we do we need to revisit what we're doing on the job, or how much time it's taking? Is there something the client can help us with to get us back into our budgeted time, or do we just need to increase our budget for the upcoming renewal cycle with the client? We're gonna sit down with the team and review it to understand it. What's made the job take longer? What's more are there more transactions? Are there more bank accounts? Are there more credit card accounts? Is the client misclassifying things? What's causing us to have more time than our budget? So if we budgeted 10 hours on a job, and we're just consistently spending 13, 14, 15 hours, we're going to look at that with the team and see, is it something, do we just, is the client grown, like we're going to, if the client has increased, and we need to revisit, our engagement letter and do a fee increase letter to the client, give them an updated time budget on the job. We try to look at our jobs, and so sometimes that might be where we've built that into the cycle. And one of the great things we use TaxDome is we have a pricing pipeline that we have all of our bookkeeping and year-end fee clients in. And one of the things we do is we give the majority of our business clients, we send a year-end fee tax return, and we bill it and collect our fee in advance in January. And so in this pipeline, we've got all of our clients there that where we do our pricing. And so that's where I'll make notes in the client notes, and then I'll attach them to that pipeline, that my pricing pipeline, to that job for that client. So then when I go to set pricing for the following year, I go to each job, and I can look at that, or my partners, they set pricing on their jobs. And so we'll look at the job card where we've taken notes that will basically update, and set our our contracts and our pricing for the coming year.
All right, the last topic that we have today is all about starting to work. I'm going to briefly cover some of the key steps I recommend, and then we'll listen once more to our consultant and see what he suggests. All right, my suggestions are as follows. Implement all the features you are comfortable with using initially. TaxDome offers a lot of tools, but you can gradually introduce them. So if you or your team are overwhelmed by things, it's completely fine to tone it down a little bit. Simplify your processes. The goal here is to make your work significantly easier, after all, not to add more work. After you set up your pipelines, just like you want them to be, complete a test run. Now, we talked about this in the second session, but I cannot stress enough how important it is to complete 1 or 2 test runs from both the client side and the firm perspective before you add all of your real clients to the pipeline. This is going to help you spot any remaining issues that need to be ironed out, and you might also spot room for some additional improvement. Once you're satisfied, create jobs for all your clients and start tackling them one by one. Now, depending on your process, you may or may not have to do much right away. If the first steps are completely on the client, then just sit back and focus on them once they complete their responsibilities and you get to your own tasks. During your actual work, keep an eye on your Inbox Plus or your email notifications. They are the easiest way to keep up with everything that's going on. Besides that, regularly check the tasks page in the workflow section. Just like we explained in the first session, tasks are your to-dos. Everything you see there that's assigned to you is important. Therefore, you should always keep track of it. And next, don't forget to track your time. Knowing how much time your employees spent on jobs, how much time certain clients took up, how efficient your team was, and also whether you stayed within your time budget is crucial information for any successful firm. To have an accurate representation of that data, you need your team to use the time entries. So those are the main suggestions that I have for firms starting to work with their clients for the first time in TaxDome. But let's go ahead and hear what our consultant has to add to this.
I would say join the community. I think that join the community. There's a lot of really good tips that people make on the community. Again, I think it's Facebook, and I think we're transitioning right now to a new TaxDome community, and so I would say join both those places, and you're going to get a lot of good tips there from other users on how to use the program. I would say kind of just look through a couple of the 1040 templates, do the boot camps, There's a lot of that. That's one of the things that I found refreshing with, I found it to be, you know, the help and how to what has, for us been fantastic. So we rarely have ever had to call support or anything, because the help and how to, a lot of videos out there, in the help and how to, in YouTube channels. There's videos for even your clients on how to use, TaxDome, and how to, whether it be sign a return, or, logging into the portal first time. And so the help and how to is fantastic. So I would say, start there. But we looked at all the, not all, but we looked at a good percentage of the templates for the various 1040s, and then kind of picked what we felt like started and fit us the best, in the templated, pipelines. And then we copied that over. And of course we just did one in the boot camp that probably is out there in the templated library that you can download and use. And that's a really good starting point, is that pipeline. And I would, if you attend any of the boot camps, I feel like those are pretty good, also to kind of give you a refresher, on, how the pipeline system works.
All right, everybody. So let's take a minute now to go over everything that we discussed today. We started today's session by learning about our conditional automations and how that system works. We then showed you how you can create custom job statuses and what you'll be using them for, before going over how you can use organizers to tag your clients in order to help you use conditional automations more effectively. Following that, we talked about our recurring jobs and why you should use them instead of creating all of your jobs manually. Then we talk about the importance of linking all relevant elements to your jobs in order to keep everything organized. We followed that up with a small discussion of our time tracking and budgeting tools to explain how those play a role in your general workflow. And finally, we spent a bit of time going over how you should start getting going with the work in TaxDome after setting everything up. Now, that was a lot of content, everybody. In this series, we kept everything simple in order to teach you from the ground up why you should use these features and how they're going to benefit your firm. However, if you're looking for more in-depth tutorials about any of the topics that we introduced to you, make sure to visit our Help Center and our Academy, as they are both fantastic resources which will help you learn the ins and outs of everything that we talked about. Now, if you reach the third session of this workflow series, it means that you likely already created some pipelines and you're making great progress. However, I hope that today's webinar did help you learn a little bit more about the possibilities of TaxDome's workflow tools, and I most certainly hope that you will take the time to implement them and, of course, benefit from them. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We appreciate your time today. Hopefully this was very helpful for you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.